go to Vanessa Neumann. She is a Venezuelan-American business owner. She's an author. She's a political theorist. She's on our show all the time. She's the president and founder of Asymmetrica, a political risk research and consulting firm headquartered in the swamp where I am. In the swamp. Here we are, swimming in the swamp. And here's my weather forecast today. Washington, rain. Florida, sunshine. Go to Florida. Better off than here. No question about it. Vanessa, good to have you with us.
We made for our being in Miami, given all the work we do in Latin America. You know,
it is
the financial center of Latin America. So, anyway, but we're having fun here a little bit in the swamp. We were in Congress yesterday. We launched a report that we had written with funded by a group called the Counter Extremism Project. They do a lot of work on social media and stuff, de-radicalizing terrorists and finding ways to, stop that online recruitment. And they do a lot of stuff also in the Middle East. But we brought them an idea a couple of months ago that there's a lot of bad stuff going on in Latin America and something called the tri-border area, where you have Brazil, Argentina, which are two huge economies, and Paraguay, and you've got all of this trade and contraband and illicit funding, and they estimate down there that they're moving $43 billion a year that goes dark. It's more than the economy of Paraguay, which is the one kind of doing it. So it means that most of the stuff that they're doing is like illegal, and it's going to fund Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and just, Brazilian drug trafficking groups. And so we wrote this thing, and we kind of braced for impact. And it's about 130 pages. The Wall Street Journal featured it yesterday before we even launched it, which was great. And then we had a Republican, Keith Rothfuss, who is out of Pittsburgh, has Pennsylvania's 12th district, which is just outside Pittsburgh. Real, your listeners' territory kind of thing, very Trump supporters. And he just read the report, and he said, I'm taking this on. And he's on the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Terror and Illicit Finance and the Judiciary Committee, this is a guy who can, do something about this. And he came out and made a statement, and we've just gotten, so much goodwill that they've realized that if you want to stop a lot of those bad guys going on either, in the Middle East, that they're killing Americans, Hezbollah is, fighting in Syria. And we had on our panel a guy called Derek Maltz, who was a tough guy, really tough guy. Half the bad guys I described in my book, Blood Prophets, he caught them. And he lost his brother in Afghanistan to a Hezbollah member. So it's personal to us. And to see the leadership finally, come out on this issue and say, if you want to take this problem seriously and you want to protect American lives and American economy, you've got to look at where the money's coming from. And it's coming a lot from the tri-border area. It's huge. So we're kind of enjoying the swamp yesterday and today.
You know what? Great work being done by you.
Thank you.
I want to talk about Guatemala opening up the second embassy now in Jerusalem following the United States. Guatemala opening up their embassy, moving it to Jerusalem along with the U.S. That's the second country. They're in Latin America. Why did they do it, and will anyone else follow?
Well, why not? So Guatemala is an interesting place. So back in 2012, I worked with one of my colleagues. We were doing training on what we call asymmetric warfare, which is sort of counterinsurgency and counter gangs who behave like insurgents in Guatemala with other friends. So I know the place. And they've been receiving a lot of aid because a lot of the immigrants, I think I discussed this last time I was on your show, that, come storming the U.S. border is basically, come because of the violence and in what's the other tri-border area, what we call the Golden Triangle, which is Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. the U.S. has been pouring money into trying to stop it, right? Because I said that last time, that the only way you stop it is to stop the waves of immigrants, is to give them the conditions to stay at home. So this is a show of support and alliance to the U.S. Guatemala is a tiny country. It's not a rich country, but it's a show of gratitude for what the U.S. has done in trying to help them tackle their gang problems and their violence and their drug trafficking problems so that they can stay at home and stop coming here. So it's good. And I'm very heartened to see, a small, troubled country back up the U.S. and a small, troubled country from Latin America. And hopefully others will follow. They should.
Who do you think would be the next Latin American company that might follow Guatemala? Because obviously the more embassies that go to Jerusalem, the better our decision looks, and the more difficult it is to blame the protest killings and 100 Palestinians did on the U.S. And obviously if you can get 5 or 6 embassies there, then it becomes that much more difficult to then unravel that if there is indeed a two-state peace solution that might one day divide Jerusalem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't talk about it very much, but the U.S. has more allies in Latin America than sort of people realize, because they don't, sometimes it's not good for the countries to talk about it, because it's like, it's working with your constituency. But every once in a while, they'll rear up their heads and do the right thing. Traditionally, the biggest ally in the region, Mexico isn't going to do it, not under this environment. The Mexico-Trump relationship is, forget it. It's too complicated.
Right.
But you have other ones, like Colombia traditionally has been a huge U.S. ally, the recipient of lots of money. The U.S. basically saved that country. It was a failed state with the drugs and the guerrilla groups and the terrorist groups, and they propped it up. With this president, he's a little sensitive to be seen too close to the U.S. because of the Venezuela situation. I expect them to follow later. You could get other countries like Peru. Peru has come out very strong, and other positions on being pro-democracy, pro-business, toward pro-democracy, pro-business, and following the line of the U.S. government, and particularly the Trump administration, and arguing against Cuba and against the dictatorial regime in Venezuela, and they're second in strength to the U.S. government in that kind of messaging. So they could follow along, and I would expect Argentina, because you have a right-wing president right now, Macri, who's all business all the time, and they have a huge Jewish population. They have the biggest Jewish population in the Western Hemisphere, more than the U.S. even, percentage-wise. So given their right-wing leanings and their strong relationship with the U.S. and the Jewish population, I would expect Argentina to move their embassy as well.
Really?
Which would be good news.
That would be great news, no question about it. Let's get to the Venezuelan situation. How dire is it? Is help on the way?
Horribly dire, and no, unfortunately. So it just gets worse and worse and worse. It's just a spiraling nightmare of hunger, exodus. We have a human migration that's not quite at Syria levels, but it will be by the end of the year. And we have a infant mortality rate higher than Syria, and just the hunger is really spreading everywhere, and it's kind of destabilizing the region. Help? Well, we have these fake elections on Sunday, on May 20th, which is completely rigged. I mean, the legitimate authorities that are recognized by the international community as being the real government that were elected by the people, which is the National Assembly, the Supreme Court in exile. They removed them in exile because their lives were in danger under the dictatorship. And they issued an arrest warrant for the president saying, look, you're indicted for massive corruption. You're not supposed to be in the presidential palace. Never mind having elections. But he's going to have his elections anyway. He's got some fake stalking horse candidate. What we're waiting to see is what happens after that. There's a lot of rumors of, are there massive civil disobedience? Are there massive protests? If there's protests, will there be violence? will there be an internal coup against them? There's a lot of rumblings that the military are unhappy. The U.S. keeps sanctioning them, keeps taking their money from the leaders, and the ones at the bottom are like, I'm not getting paid enough for this, you know? Mm-hmm. So we're going to see what happens next week. If they are, everybody has calculated that the President Maduro leaves this year, one way or another. And then the next thing would have to be, you have to get humanitarian aid in. You know, the planes, and you need guys with guns to secure it, because it's almost like a Somalia situation now. It's so bad. And then after that, you know, try and come to some agreement of how to move forward. But this is all like long timeline stuff. But in Venezuela, it's the next week that's really going to be pivotal. Let's see what happens as a consequence of this.
Vanessa, I got to go. I'm out of time. More information at Vanessa Neumann, John Fredericks Radio Network.